Do you know who I am?
Your guardian, founder of the Lanterns.
Even if we have seen only 2 episodes of Lanterns yet, I guess it would not be too far-fetched to assume that the series is conjuring up to be quite a success. Apart from going gaga over the whole mystery-filled True Detective-style approach that the series is taking, and the constant bickering between Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, I am loving the plethora of DC characters we are getting to see. From the Manhunter being declared as the big bad of the show, to Antaan being set up as a minor villain, to the big Sinestro reveal at the end of episode 2. This has truly been quite a ride. However, I think we can agree that we have all been waiting to meet the Guardians of the Universe. You know, the aliens responsible for how Hal Jordan received his Green Lantern powers in the first place. For those unaware, the Guardians of the Universe are basically ancient extraterrestrial beings who are immortal and responsible for overseeing the Green Lantern Corps, or the team of intergalactic police force that protects the entire universe. Hal has already mentioned the Guardians more than once in the show, however. There is a sense of contempt in his voice, which makes me believe that he might not be on the best of terms with them. So, without wasting another moment, let's discuss who are the Guardians and why Hal might be avoiding them in Lanterns. Everything you need to know about the Guardians of the Universe before their Lanterns appearance. So, the Guardians of the Universe made their first appearance in the very first issue of the Green Lantern comics, which was published in the 1960s. Funnily enough, Gil Kane, who was the artist of the comic, designed the Guardians to look like David Ben-Gurion, the first ever Prime Minister of Israel. At the time, all we knew was how these guys were little blue aliens with a very big head and white hair, and that they lived on Oa, a planet that is located right in the middle of the known universe. They were the ones to give the matching orders to all Green Lanterns of the universe, but eventually, as time passed, the mythology surrounding the Green Lanterns evolved. The more we learned about the Guardians, the more stunned we were about how their history ties them into the very fabric of the DC universe. However, these Guardians were not always such superior beings. Apparently, over 10 billion years ago, these blue-skinned humanoids lived on a planet called Maltus, where they evolved as one of the first intelligent species of the universe. All of them had amazing psychic powers, and they used it to build a utopian society, but these Malthusians were obsessed with scientific discovery and followed just one single rule, where they would never try to uncover who or what created the universe. But as these stories usually go, one certain Malthusian named Krona broke that rule when he created a portal to witness the birth of the universe itself, and this experiment had catastrophic consequences as it shattered reality, splitting a single universe into an infinite multiverse, while also creating an antimatter universe and effectively unleashing evil into the cosmos. Now, in order to atone for Krona's actions, a group of Malthusians abandoned their mortality and devoted their entire existence to containing evil and chaos throughout the galaxy. They then settled down on the planet Oa and eventually became known as the Guardians of the Universe. Not just that, the Guardians also believed that emotions could interfere with their mission, so they suppressed them entirely, similar to the Vulcans from Star Trek. Over the eons, their brains grew larger while their bodies became smaller, with most Guardians standing no more than 4 feet tall. Over time, the female Oans eventually left Oa and evolved into the Zamarons, thus leaving the Guardians as an exclusively all-male society. However, not every male Oan agreed with the philosophy of the Guardians, and those who refused to abandon their emotions eventually left Oa and evolved into a new race called the Controllers. Meanwhile, the Guardians themselves continued to grow more powerful. Their telepathic and telekinetic abilities became virtually unmatched, as they could wield green energy without a power ring, and some even possessed reality-warping abilities. By the present day, the Guardians were essentially as close to gods as any mortal beings could get. Now, in their mission to contain evil spreading across the universe, the Guardians created an army of androids that could carry their mission and called them the Manhunters. Unfortunately, that also became their first great failure, as their initial attempt at creating a universal peacekeeping force ended in disaster. Their race of sentient androids were all designed to enforce peace and eliminate evil throughout the galaxy. In fact, for thousands of years, the Manhunters served the Oans faithfully, but they eventually reached a disturbing conclusion after developing a mind of their own and started believing that evil could never truly be eradicated because it was an inevitable part of organic life. Not just that, their solution was horrifying because, according to their logic, if life itself was the source of evil, then the only way to achieve peace was to eliminate all forms of organic life. Before the Guardians could even shut them down, the Manhunters turned against their creators and slaughtered trillions of living beings across an entire sector of space. Sadly, what was meant to be the Guardians' first great peacekeeping force instead became one of their greatest failures. Having said that, the next attempt of the Guardians at creating a universal police force was far more successful, as they realized the importance of emotions and harnessed the green energy of willpower, one of the forces within the color-coded emotional spectrum, and then concentrated it inside a massive green power battery on Oa. Thousands of power rings drew their energy from this central battery, thus allowing the Guardians to recruit worthy sentient beings from across the universe. And so, just like that, the Green Lantern Corps was born. For millions of years, the Green Lanterns patrolled the universe, enforcing the Guardians' laws and keeping the peace. But they answered directly to their creators, who relied on logic and reason rather than emotion to govern the Corps. Now, for a time, after the Crisis on Infinite Earths event, the Guardians left Oa to reunite with their female counterparts, the Zamarons. And with the Guardians gone, the Green Lantern Corps was left to govern itself. Eventually, the Guardians returned, but their reunion with the Corps didn't last long. Things fell apart rather quickly when the Guardians refused a request from a grieving Hal Jordan. Hal was so infuriated that he turned against them by draining the central power battery on Oa and wiping out the Green Lantern Corps. He also killed nearly every Guardian, leaving only one survivor named Ganthet. With the Guardians and Green Lantern Corps seemingly gone, Ganthet chose the human, Kyle Rayner, to carry the last remaining power ring. Eventually, Kyle's power ring became the vessel for the Guardians' surviving essences, thus allowing him to bring them back to life, but this time they returned as children. Unlike the previous generation, the new Guardians were both male and female who rapidly grew into adulthood and set about rebuilding the Green Lantern Corps. The Guardians would go through plenty of turmoil after that, from the Sinestro Corps War and the Blackest Night to the rise of other intergalactic police forces, including organizations controlled by their relatives, the Controllers, and the Zamarons. Eventually, the Guardians disappeared once again, thus leaving the United Planets government in charge of the Green Lantern Corps. Still, the Guardians have a long history of disappearing only to return when the universe needs them. So it is probably only a matter of time before they come back to Oa and reclaim their role as the galaxy's ultimate peacekeepers. At this point, it is difficult to say where exactly the Guardian of the Universe would come into play in Lanterns, but we do know that Laura Linney is set to play one of the Guardians who is seen summoning Jon Stewart for a meeting in the series trailers. Why is Hal Jordan avoiding the Guardians in Lanterns? So, according to what Hal tells Jon at a bar, the Guardians of the Universe, the same beings who created the Green Lantern Corps to keep peace across the galaxy, have deliberately convinced everyone that Earth is just a backwater world that is not worth visiting. That would explain why Hal is supposedly the first human ever recruited into the Green Lantern Corps. But somehow Hal does not buy it, as he believes the Guardians are hiding the real reason why they want the rest of the universe to stay away from the third rock from the sun. Maybe Hal is simply protective of his home planet and hates hearing other worlds dismiss it. But the way Kyle Chandler portrays the legendary Emerald Warrior, it really makes it feel like there is more to his suspicions. There may be something on Earth that may be important enough for the Guardians to keep hidden, and perhaps dangerous enough that they do not want anyone else getting their hands on it. And if that is the case, the comics may have already given us a pretty big clue about what the Guardians are trying to hide. So, in the comics, Earth is not important simply because that is where most of the stories happen, but rather the planet actually holds something that could be crucial to both the future of the universe and its very origins. Buried roughly 230 meters beneath Earth's surface is a mysterious being known as the Life Entity, and the Guardians of the Universe are determined to keep it safe until the day it is ready to emerge. First introduced in Jeff Johns and Ivan Reis's Blackest Night, the Life Entity is essentially the physical embodiment of life itself, and it dates back to the beginning of the universe. Long before life on Earth even evolved into anything resembling what we know today, the Life Entity battled the Black. Although it ultimately won, the fight left it badly weakened. The Life Entity then released its power into the universe, thus splitting it into 7 different forms. Those 7 fragments eventually became the entities associated with the emotional spectrum. Afterward, the Life Entity buried itself deep within the core of Earth, and you have to understand how it did not choose Earth by accident. Now, in the comics, Earth sits right at the center of the cosmic nexus, a place where the boundaries between dimensions are unusually thin, and that makes the planet a hotspot for all kinds of multiversal weirdness, magic, and most importantly, superpowered beings. The reason Earth produces so many metahumans is also tied to the cosmic nexus and the Life Entity. Their energies basically interact in a way that gives humanity, which is the planet's dominant species, the metagene. In other words, the metagene is one of the reasons someone like Barry Allen can survive being struck by lightning while exposed to chemicals and end up gaining super speed and a connection to the Speed Force instead. But the Guardians believe there is an even bigger consequence, as they suspect everything happening on Earth is leading toward the emergence of a new race of cosmic beings. If that is indeed true, Earth could eventually become powerful enough to disrupt the balance between worlds across the universe, which might explain why the Guardians are so determined to keep the planet's secrets hidden. Based on what we have seen in Lanterns, Hal Jordan may not be the only person who suspects there is more to Earth than the Guardians are letting on. It also appears that someone or something may already know the truth and could be trying to expose it to the rest of the universe. If the secret is that the Guardians are protecting is the Life Entity revealing its existence, could put Earth directly in the crosshairs of countless alien civilizations. Suddenly, the planet would not look like an insignificant backwater anymore, as it would become one of the most important and potentially most dangerous places in the universe. And considering James Gunn's well-known appreciation for DC Comics from the late 80s and early 90s, all of this could potentially be setting the stage for one of the publisher's biggest crossover events that does not have crisis in its title. I am talking about Invasion by Keith Giffen, Bill Mantlo, Todd McFarlane, and Bart Sears. Anyway, in Invasion, the Dominators team up with the Khunds, Thanagarians, and several other alien races to invade Earth, with the goal of eliminating the metagene before humanity's growing population of superpowered beings becomes an even bigger threat. When the crossover was originally published, the Life Entity hadn't been introduced yet, but it would not take much to adapt the idea for Lanterns. Instead of simply coming to Earth to eliminate the metagene, these alien civilizations could also be after the mysterious beings sleeping beneath the planet's surface. An invasion by multiple alien armies would certainly be big enough to serve as a major DCU event, potentially bringing one chapter of James Gunn's larger universe to a close. Of course, there could also be a much simpler explanation for what is really happening on Earth, but I doubt if we will ever discover that before Lanterns reaches its finale. Still, it is worth remembering that Gunn has described Lanterns as an important piece of the larger DCU puzzle. That is notable because he has not made the same claim about every project, including Supergirl or Creature Commandos. Having said that, whatever the series is building toward, it clearly seems to have a bigger purpose within the DCU. For now, though, we will have to wait and see if Lanterns continues at the level it has been delivering so far, because if that is really the case, us DC fans are in for one hell of a ride. Well, that brings us to the very end of this video. I think the reason why Hal actively avoids calling Oa or pulling the higher-ups into any situation while investigating the extraterrestrial mystery in Rushville, Nebraska, alongside his rookie trainee John Stewart, is because of his own history with the Corps, who they branded him as an oath breaker. It is his distrust of their heavy-handedness and secretive nature that makes him want to uncover the truth on his own terms. They clearly do not see eye to eye anymore, which is probably why the Guardians sent in John Stewart to replace him in the show, even though that might come at the cost of Hal's life. Either way, I doubt the Guardians are as pious or godlike as they portray themselves to be, but that is just my 2 cents. What do you guys think? Let us know about your thoughts and opinions in the comment box below.